Are you familiar with the January 11th New York Times article about FBI open inquiry into whether Trump was secretly working on behalf of Russians?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Would you promise me and this committee to look into this and tell us whether or not, in the appropriate way, a counterintelligence investigation was opened up by somebody at the FBI/Department of Justice against President Trump?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think there are a number of investigations, as I understand it, going on in the department.
Have you ever heard of such a thing in all the time you've been associated with the Department of Justice?
I have never heard of that.
Are there rules about how you can do counterintelligence investigations?
I believe there are, Mr. Chairman.
So if you want to open up one against the president, are there any checks and balances?
Not outside the FBI.
Okay, well, we need to look at that. Mueller. You say you've known Mueller a long time. Would you say you have a close relationship with Mr. Mueller?
I would say we were good friends.
Would you say that you understand him to be a fair-minded person?
Absolutely.
Do you trust him to be fair to the president and the country as a whole?
Yes.
When his report comes to you, will you share it with us as much as possible?
Consistent with the regulations and the law, yes.
Do you believe Mr. Mueller would be involved in a witch hunt against anybody?
I don't believe Mr. Mueller would be involved in a witch hunt.
Will you commit to no interference with the scope of the special counsel's investigation?
I will. The scope of the special counsel's investigation is set by his charter and by the regulations, and I will ensure that those are maintained.
Will you commit to providing Mr. Mueller with the resources, funds, and time needed to complete his investigation?
Yes.
Will you commit to ensuring that Special Counsel Mueller is not terminated without good cause, consistent with department regulations?
Absolutely.
If Special Counsel Mueller makes any request, for instance, about the scope of his investigation or resources for his investigation, will you commit to notifying Congress if you deny that request?
I think the regulations require notification of Congress if there's a disagreement.
Will you commit to making any report Mueller produces at the conclusion of his investigation available to Congress and to the public?
As I said in my statement, I am going to make as much information available as I can, consistent with the rules and regulations that are part of the special counsel regulations.
Will you commit to making any report on the obstruction of justice public?
That's the same answer.
Thank you. Your 2018 in it, you stated, and I quote, "The framers' plan contemplates that the president's law enforcement powers extend to all matters, including those in which he had a personal stake," end quote. Please explain what you base this conclusion on.
Here's the Department of Justice right here. And within the Department of Justice, enforcement decisions are being made. The president's over here. And I think of it as there are two categories of potential communications. One would be on a case that the president wants to communicate about that he has no personal interest in, no political interest in. Let's say the president's concerned about Chinese stealing trade secrets and say, I want you to go after this company that's being, that may be stealing trade secrets. That's perfectly appropriate for him to do, to communicate that. But whether it's bona fide or not, the Department of Justice's obligation and the Attorney General's obligation is not to take any action unless the Department of Justice and the Attorney General, reach their own independent conclusion that it is justified under the law, and regardless of the instruction. And that's my quote that everyone is saying, I'm sicking the, it's okay for the president to direct things. All I said was, it's not per se improper for the president to call on the department for doing something, especially if he has no personal or political interest in it. The other category of cases, and let's pick an easy bad example, would be if a member of the president's family or a business associate or something was under investigation and he tries to intervene. He he's the chief law enforcement officer, and you could say, well, he has the power, but that would be a breach of his obligation under the Constitution to faithfully execute the laws. So, in my opinion, if a president attempts to intervene in a matter that he has a stake in to protect himself, that should first be looked at as a breach of his constitutional duties. Whether it also violates a statute, depending on what statute comes into play and what all the facts are.